Ulrich, and then Sister Helen.
First of all, thank you very much for your stimulating presentation. In the first part of your presentation, you were talking about the energy footprint of digital technologies. And there I have a question. Did you take into account that digital technologies may also contribute to energy saving? For example, regarding traditional production or traditional types of consumption?
Sister Helen.
I wanted to say thank you very much. It's always great to see the religious leading in these things, because I think this sort of holistic view, this integral view, we are really part of living a tradition which we can hand on to other people, which then they can take to other parts of society. But my question is more about the connection between the global and the local that you mentioned at the end, which I think is also a very Christian, actually, thing too. But I'm thinking about all the really interesting thinkers from France who've been thinking about this for, going way back, especially, of course, as a Dominican. I'm thinking about Louis-Joseph Lebray. And I think it would be really great that the students should be introduced to this long tradition, that this isn't something that everybody's been bad in the economy before, but these things have been actively excluded from formation. And it was already there, and we've got this huge historical background to draw on. Thank you.
Enrico.
Thank you very much. You said that you would like to know more about what's going on in other countries. As Italian Alliance for Sustainable Development, we had pushed the rectors of Italian universities to establish the network of universities for sustainable development. And now 70 universities have joined this network out of 80. By the way, the Catholic ones normally did not subscribe this network. We have to work a little bit on that. This network does three things in particular. First is to manage universities according to sustainability principles, so the management of water, energy, and so on and so forth, and also food now, in order to manage the canteens in a more sustainable. So practicing, if you wish, the sustainable development principles. But then they are working, and I'm chairing this network of those who are responsible for education for sustainable development. And we have established, if you wish, three main lines of action. First, lesson zero, if you wish, that all students have to take. Our motto is that no one can leave an Italian universities without knowing the 2030 agenda and the key principles of sustainable development. As ASVIS, we have developed an e-learning course on the 2030 agenda, which is now also translated in English, if you are interested, and has been taken by thousands of students. Second, the focus courses in the 3 years or the masters. And third, this is now the big issue, is and trans-disciplinary teaching of sustainability through the system theory and other approaches, ethical and so on. Let me just close with saying that our course in sustainable development has been now given to all schools in Italy. Almost 70,000 teachers have taken this course last year, and all of them have to take, according to the new directives of the minister, and we are going to establish also the school and the network of Italian schools for sustainable development, with hundreds which have already expressed an interest. This is just to say that you have to start from the beginning, And then the most difficult stuff is with the business schools, which of course now they are teaching corporate social responsibility, but this is not what we should teach. So I think that that is really the core, the most complicated stuff, and where international cooperation may help. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate your presentation. I would just like to make things more complex. I totally agree that everything that is digital comports an electrical power consumption. But just to give you an example, there is a system developed by Rolls-Royce, Boeing, and Azure, the digital system of Microsoft, that applied to each single flight, each single Boeing plane, allow the company that is running the flight to save from 3 to 4% of fuel on each flight. So that means that it has an electrical cost, but it saves much, much more in CO2 dioxide, carbon dioxide footprint. And because it has a cost, the saving on each flight, it's about 70% of the cost that you put inside the energy for that calculation. So probably we should open up the approach and saying that everything is costless. Everything, also living, also eat costs something in CO2 footprint. But it depends in which way we say that it's useful or less useful to apply. And I totally agree that probably entertainment, it's the big amount of internet consumption, but bringing people to a giant mall with a personal car, consuming something for air conditioning and so on, it's a worst footprint. So yes, things are different. We should understand well what we are measuring. Okay? And I really appreciate what you told, because I personally, I'm really convinced that the real problem are the metal behind. And that is a real deep source of injustice in the world. But about electrical consumption alone, I think that looking at the big picture, we are saving things, watching Netflix instead of going to the mall. And then the real problem is a problem of governance. Which kind of impact we would like to develop? Because if it's true that Netflix is saving the carbon dioxide emission, it's also true that the displacement of richness is really different now. From a really local displacement in the local cinema to one player around the world. Then the real problem coming to education for me is the kind of the approach that we would like to give to the young student now. And from what I'm aware, there are two models. One model is the United States one with computational thinking. That has the real huge positive side to give to the kids the ability to understand what's behind the digital system, but it's a reductive one in the sense that they are forced to look at life like a problem to solve. And in that sense, a huge amount of philosophy and deepness of life is something that is not working. Then Cédric Villani told me about the French model. I never tried to pronounce a French word, but probably you know what I'm talking about, something that in English should sound like digital humanities. But in both cases, what we are missing now are professors. So we know that we have to change something, but we are not working to prepare the generation of teachers that should stay with the future. And that should be an emergency that we should stress out. We need also people that train that people, the future worker. And so I think that we have to a little bit to open up the perspective. Thank you very much.
We had one more question over here.
Well, thank you very much for your paper. Congratulations. I don't have any question. I would like, if it is possible, that you develop a little bit the last part of your paper, because I think it's very, very, very interesting project, the campus of transition. And I would like to know when you teach ecoethics at the university, the problem is not to teach ecoethics. It's when the student arrive into the company and they cannot apply the ecoethics inside the company. No. How to resolve this problem? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Pier Paolo.
Well, Cecile, very interesting paper, thank you. I have let's say, a question to myself that I wanted to clarify. All your construction, I mean, and all the theories about sustainability, including Professor Giovannini's paper, presupposes that there could be a good positive correlation between the fourth industrial revolution, which is a revolution in science and technology, and the kind of lifestyle you have depicted, frugal yet convivial and joyful. So my question is, we are facing a situation, a future in which there will be more inequalities, less happiness, less well-being widespread into the population, less social integration, less social capital, instability of social relations, and all this is the product of the fourth industrial revolution. So I don't understand how we can have such a lifestyle, such a culture of sustainability, the ecological, let's say, culture, and at the same time, the fourth industrial revolution. The only explanation, maybe naive explanation, is that we have just to stop the fourth industrial revolution. I don't know. That's is a question I've put to myself, and I wanted to know your opinion about. Thank you.
Let me, before we turn back to Cecile, I have a couple of questions, one on each part of your presentation. On the first part, I wonder if you have an opinion on, there's a book out by John McAfee from MIT where he basically argues the opposite of you, that because of what he calls dematerialization, the ecological footprint has gotten a lot better. I personally think it's a really bad book, but I was just wondering what your views were on that. And on the second part of the presentation, I wanted to echo Sister Helen's point that, you know, we have this conceit that economics is value-free, which of course it isn't, and I think Laudato Si demonstrates brilliantly what kind of values dominate our modern economy and where they're leading us. And I think that, you know, the principles of Catholic social teaching have analogues in all of the great religious traditions, things like the common good and integral human development, solidarity, and I'm just wondering if you see any, any possibility in a world of secularism and laicite that we can actually adopt these kind of principles as the values to underpin economics and business education. And I think we will turn back to you, Cecile.
Thank you for all these very interesting questions and comments. Maybe on the first part, what I said about the digital economy and the energy footprint, it's true that I've insisted more on the problems related to the fact that very often we don't take into account this aspect when we speak about energy savings thanks to the digital economy, that just to have a more balanced view of the issues. And also, and that's why, and I fully agree with what you say, and it was sometimes through maybe a too narrow perspective, or we have to show how complex it is. Anyway, when we have the global trends in mind, we see that we really have to decrease on on the production of digital devices and all this, and that's when we see the reports concerning the very unequal share of access to the digital economy in the world. If we want to promote a better access for most vulnerable people and with the good consequences in terms of education and all this, it means that we have to reduce. And maybe it has to see with your question, Paolo, about the fourth revolution. I don't think we can stop it. It would be completely unrealistic, but maybe I also discuss with people who are experts on aspects related to minerals and who say if we don't seriously take into account these aspects, in fact, it's even physical meaning not sustainable itself. So for me, there is this kind of discernment that we have to do every time to know when it is very useful and necessary to promote the digital economy in order to ensure better living conditions and quality of life and relations, but then try to really to reduce a very, but from it's a very radical perspective in a way, and at the campus we have many discussions on this because we have the two sensitivities. Some of us think that we have to promote low tech and that's it, and reduce as much as possible our consumption of digital devices and this. And others say, but if we reflect from a multi-scale perspective, we have to acknowledge that it's useful, it can be useful. So for me, it's a mixed. We have really to be very balanced about this aspect. About the how to integrate within curricula Catholic social teaching, the question that both of you raise. In fact, we try to do so. For example, we run our first 2 months training in last April and May, and we have 2 days on ecology and spirituality, and 1 day was about Catholic social teaching, and I said to the students and to the professionals who were there that even if they were not all of them were Christians, there were maybe 4 or 5 among the 23, but they were very interested, and they said that it was excellent, that it was a very deep perspective on what is going on, and that for them it really made sense. And I don't know whether you are familiar with the work done by Michel-Maxime Heger, who is a sociologist from Switzerland, who is Orthodox, but he works a lot on called inner transition with different grassroots movements. He has published several books on orthodoxy, and it means also Christian perspective on ecology, and he has also published books on eco-spirituality and eco-psychology. And it's also related to Joanna Macy's work. Joanna Macy is a Buddhist activist, and in fact, I think what she says and the exercises she offers is very close to the Christian perspective. And for me, it's very useful. Even with my sisters, I offer to propose a vision of what and Joanna Macy is a Buddhist, but she wants to offer a universal path in order to promote integral ecology. And depending on the public we have at the campus, we can also and reflect on Lebret's perspective and all the work that has been done for decades on this from a denominational perspective, and also just mention some Christian thinkers and the encyclical letters and all this, and why also having connections with Buddhists or with Jews and also the Muslim tradition, and try to foster a dialogue. And in my experience, even in France, we have to be careful, but it's possible, and really people are very interested and think that this spiritual dimension is key. And at the end of the 2 months, when there was a rereading of the journey made by the participants, I was amazed by the fact that a majority of them spoke of spirituality as a key experience, although it's a non-denominational project. But I think the fact that we were too religious, that we were not hiding this aspect, even if we were quite discreet, was a kind of testimony. And for me, it's quite hopeful for the future. About ethics, and then how do these young people or professionals who have strong convictions and who see the discrepancy between the level of the objective that they would like to have in their company and the fact that the day-to-day life is not up to the objectives. I think it's complicated. I am also, I see every week we have young people coming, young professionals coming to us who say, I am lost, I'm depressed, because I think that there is such a gap between the objectives and the reality, the trends, and what we see that we have to create the conditions for maybe not only conviviality, but I think to help people go deeper into their own spiritual life, I would say, and then help them find resources with others in order to try to see what are the levers they can use in the work. And I see more and more people, professionals, that decide either to leave their job situation and to change and to try to find a place where they could have less inner tensions, and in fact we do think that there is a lot of work, and also for Christians, and maybe in order to accompany these people on the long run, because of course when people have very deep experience, then they want to change, and then when they come back to real life, it's very difficult. So we try to see what we could, the kind of network we can create, and then promote personal accompaniment. But it takes a lot of time, so it's difficult. And then my experience, for example, when we wrote the 20 proposals to reform capitalism, we were 3 academics and 8 people were working in in banks or in multinationals. And the fact that they were not alone to reflect on with a reflexive perspective on their own activity was for them very helpful, and that's how one friend of mine who is was the financial director in a big company, he highlighted some issues related to taxation and then to accounting standards, and was able to raise a voice to meet with some parliament members and so on. And for me, there is very often people feel that they are alone. So how to promote connections between people that have the same perspective? And I don't know whether but I think in many countries like this, there are some people who try to connect to one another and see what they could do and how to promote a kind of advocacy, either in their own workplace or in different networks. So we try to support this, but maybe if I have some more time about the book from McCarthy. I don't really know the book. I have heard of it. I think it's completely. It's not true to say that digital economy has to see with dematerialization. Is when all about data centers and all the devices and this show that it's not the case, and that we very often we lack the knowledge on this. I think it's more how to improve the knowledge and then enable us to lead a real discernment. And then about the fact that we lack professors on these issues. One advice that was given to us by our scientific committee was try to train the trainers, to train the professors, and maybe welcome. I am in touch with the Jesuit Network for Higher Education, and I went to Georgetown, Boston College, and other big American universities last year. And what they said was, well, your project is very interesting. We should have this kind of project in the United States, because then there is a carbon footprint when you cross the Atlantic to come to Forge. But they were highlighting also the challenge related to the change in the mindset of the faculty members. And that's also my experience at ESSEC, that there are few professors who are really willing to change, but then such a big inertia. And the president of one of the biggest Jesuit universities came to me and said, well, I think that we are in a structural sin, because we are paid with fundings from the banking system and oil companies. Our campuses are not green, and our business school still teach business as usual and neoclassical economics. So the changes that are needed are tremendous. At least we can try. But thanks for what you say about what Italy is doing. I think it's great if you have this kind of consistent perspective and try to both be more, give more knowledge and skills to the students and promote interdisciplinary perspective.
See, your work is so inspiring. But before the coffee break, I'm going to let Jeff have one final comment.
I want the final comment, but I did want to make a point, which is that I wouldn't worry too much about the energy use for one basic reason. This is a sector that uses electricity. Electricity is the easiest sector to clean up of the whole climate issue.
With nuclear?
No, with wind, with solar, with anything. The problems are much harder in industry. The problems are much harder in steel, cement, aviation, shipping, buildings, transport. Because there you have to actually completely substitute the nature of the energy technology. Here, it's a matter of plugging into the wall the same way, but with wind or solar or what are now grid parity technologies. So I don't say it's not an issue, but it's not a big issue compared to most of the other energy transformations, just not because the electricity part will come very fast. The hard part is electrifying the economy, but this is already an electric part of the economy. So in this sense, the big players are already moving to basically 100% sustainability because it's cost effective for them. Amazon, Google, they're just building wind turbines, they're building solar fields, they're connecting their own systems. They want to be able to say that they're carbon free, and it's not hard for them to do so. So I just wanted to put that in perspective. All the rest I like very much, but this is just not something I would agonize over. It'll be the easiest part of the transformation, is the electricity part.
Thank you very much. And with that, let's take our coffee break and resume at 11:30. Thank you.